Today I'll be ministering from Hebrews, the 11th chapter, verses 5 and 6. By faith Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found because God had translated him. For before his translation he had this testimony, that he pleased God. But without faith it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Now the account in Scriptures can be found in Genesis, the 5th chapter, verse 18. And Jared lived 162 years, and begat Enoch. And Jared lived after he begat Enoch 800 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. And Enoch lived 65 years, and begat Methuselah. And Enoch walked with God after he begat Methuselah 300 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Enoch walked with God. Now, Enoch lived in a time that would later be described with these words. It's recorded in Genesis 6:5. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. People have said that you are a product of your environment, but that cannot be said of Enoch, can it? Enoch is seen as living in a time when men's hearts had departed from the living God. But what of Enoch? Enoch walked with God. What does that mean, he walked with God? Amos asked this question, can two walk together except they be agreed? Well, then we can see that Enoch and God were in agreement. Enoch thought more about God than he did about the world around him. God found a place to live in the heart and mind of Enoch. Enoch was not blind to the world around him. He saw their wickedness, but in spite of the world around Enoch, he walked with God. Jude has given us one of Enoch's prophecies. It's recorded in Jude, verse 14 and 15. And Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000 of his saints, to execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have ungodlily committed, and all of their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. By faith Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found because God had translated him. Those who were ungodly surrounded Enoch, but that didn't make Enoch ungodly. Enoch walked with God. By faith, Enoch prophesied of a time when God would come and judge the world because of its wickedness. Enoch told them what the consequences were for their sins, but we see that they did not want to hear it. They had hard speeches for the prophet Enoch, but Enoch told them anyway. He spoke of a time when God would convince the gainsayers. Enoch's prophecy would come to pass, and God would visit the iniquity of the sons of men upon themselves in the form of a great and terrible flood. The world has never been the same since the flood. It's one of the most devastating events to happen in Earth's history, and Enoch was given to prophesy about its coming. It seems as though Enoch's prophecy fell on deaf ears because the thoughts and intentions of their hearts were only wicked. Now this should serve as an example for our generation. We too have been given a word about a destruction that's soon going to befall the earth. We can see from the revelation that the environment surrounding Enoch did not modify him. It didn't change Enoch. He walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. For before his translation, he had this testimony, that he pleased God. God has set up Enoch as a testimony to all those who are living in a time of trouble. Faith is equal to your trials. Enoch was pleasing unto God. God was pleased with Enoch. God testified how much he was pleased with Enoch when he took him. God was so pleased with the fellowship that he had enjoyed with Enoch that one day God took Enoch unto himself. Now doesn't that sound good to the ears of those who are walking by faith? It was as if God didn't want their fellowship to be interrupted anymore. He translated him and made him able to be with the Lord. Now we can see that this is the greatest of all translations. It's one thing to theorize about God and to make guesses as to what it would be like to be in his very presence. But we are given to see the power of faith in this account of Enoch. We can see that faith can take you closer to God than men have dared to imagine. Faith is not limited by time and space. Faith is of God, and it produces the environment wherein if a man will live, he will come to be known of God. Faith brought Enoch to God, and God was pleased to take him. For before Enoch's translation, he had this testimony, that he pleased God. But without faith, it's impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Herein is seen an amazing thing. We are confronted with an impossible situation. Without faith, we are shut up to being without God. Now, faith is the only means to pleasing God. If men remain in an unbelieving condition, they are consigning themselves to the lake of fire. It's recorded in Revelation 21:8, but the fearful and unbelieving, and the abominable and murderer and whoremonger and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. God has provided a way for man to escape the wrath to come. It is not in the observance of a holy day or in the keeping of a law that we find peace with God. It is in the belief of the record that God has given of his Son. Without faith, it is impossible to be pleasing unto God. How pleased will God be with a person who is walking by faith? God has given us the account of Enoch to show and prove to man that he will ultimately bring those with faith to be with him. But without faith, this is impossible. This is why Paul exhorted us in Hebrews 3 to take heed, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God. But exhort one another daily while it's called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. For we are made partakers of Christ if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast unto the end. Being without faith will expose your heart and reveal it for what's really inside. An evil heart of unbelief. How bad is it to have an evil heart of unbelief? How bad is it to have a heart that will not believe God? Hebrews 4:2 reads, For unto us was the gospel preached as well as unto them. But the word preached did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. Without faith, we cannot believe the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, how does that translate into our everyday living here on the earth? Without faith, when the good news of God's salvation comes, it doesn't seem so important. Without faith, sin doesn't seem so bad. Without faith, the judgment of God, it seems like a fairy tale. Without faith, meeting with the brethren, it becomes a burden. Without faith, carrying a cross, it seems unimportant. Without faith, we will not walk in the Spirit. Without faith, the world looks better than heaven. Without faith, death is a fearful anticipation. Without faith, we cannot be pleasing unto God. Now, God asked an alarming question to Moses concerning the faithless people of his generation. It's recorded in Numbers 14:11. And the Lord said unto Moses, How long will this people provoke me? How long will it be ere they believe me for all the signs which I have showed among them? Now, God is not idly sitting by. He's involved in bringing many sons to glory. Not having faith in God must be seen for what it truly is. It's an attack against the goodness of God. It's an attack against his long-sufferingness. It's an attack against the person of his Son. When anyone walks in unbelief, God takes notice of it. Remember what the Lord said concerning the children of Israel when they murmured in the wilderness. It's recorded in Psalm 78:21. Wherefore the Lord heard this and was wroth. So a fire was kindled against Jacob, and anger also came up against Israel, because they believed not in God and trusted not in his salvation, though he had commanded the clouds from above and opened the doors of heaven. God is not merely displeased when men walk in unbelief. He is actively working against all them that ignore his Son. Jesus spoke clearly on the subject of believing. He says in John 3, He that believeth on him is not condemned, but he that believeth not is condemned already, because he hath not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. And this is the condemnation, that light is come into the world, and men loved darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. Now, Jesus is teaching us something here. He is opening up the reason why many around us never come to the knowledge of the truth. The fact is that they have never trusted God to provide the salvation for their souls. Jesus does not candy coat the truth, but he speaks with all authority in heaven and earth. He that believeth not is condemned already. There is a sense where everyone is already entering into their reward. For those who believe the gospel, they are being given eternal life, and they are tasting of the powers of the world to come. They have denied their lives here, and because of their faith, God is giving them the first fruits of his Spirit. But to those who will not turn to God from idols, they too are already entering into their judgment to come. There is no peace in their hearts, and there is no contentment in their lives. They have rejected the only man who could ever save them, and this this rejection has left them morally impoverished, and a fearful anticipation of death looms heavy over their hearts and minds. We see in the gospel that God is not content with this arrangement. God has provided a way wherein everyone can be saved through the belief of the gospel. But without faith, it's impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him.